We're now in John's Gospel, chapter 16, and we've reached verse 5, where Jesus is talking about equipping his disciples for the work which is ahead of them. And he is going to equip them by sending to them the Counselor. John's Gospel, chapter 16, verse 5. Now I am going to him who sent me, and yet none of you asks me, where are you going? Because I've said these things, you are filled with grief. But I tell you the truth. It's for your own good that I'm going away. Unless I go away, the Counselor will not come to you. But if I go, I will send him to you. When he comes, he will convict the world of guilt in regard to sin, and righteousness and judgment. In regard to sin, because men do not believe in me. In regard to righteousness, because I am going to the Father, where you can see me no longer. And in regard to judgment, because the prince of this world now stands condemned. I've much more to say to you, more than you can now bear. But when he, the Spirit of truth, comes, he will guide you into all truth. He will not speak on his own. He will speak only what he hears, and he will tell you what is yet to come. He will bring glory to me by taking from what is mine and making it known to you. All that belongs to the Father is mine. That's why I said, the Spirit will take from what is mine and make it known to you. In a little while you will see me no more, and then, after a little while, you will see me. A complicated passage here, dealing with spiritual truths and the work of the Holy Spirit. And all of this is founded upon this important principle which we've arrived at, this fulcrum point in time, this point which is just about to be enacted when Jesus is taken away and where he leaves them alone. And it's a transition point for the disciples because they are moving from those who learn at the foot of Jesus to those who preach the teachings of Jesus. And that's a big change. It's a growing up change. It's a maturity change. It's moving from being, children to adults, from those who receive to those who give. And this is a big, big shift. You've had 3 years of instruction, a bit like being in a degree course, and you've learned something, and then suddenly you've got to go to work, and all those things that you've been taught, you put into practice, and all of the things that you know about, you now give forth and create things. So instead of being a receiver, you become a giver and a creator. But in order to do that, you need to be equipped for the job and the role. And that's what Jesus is now going to do. Now I am going to him who sent me, and yet none of you asks me, where are you going? One thing they are convinced of here is that Jesus is leaving them. And the whole of the 3 years ministry has been a precious time, a kind of a golden age of personal teaching from God himself. They had direct access to the mind of God in Jesus Christ. He who has seen me has seen the Father, said Jesus. And the words I speak are not my words, they are God's words. It couldn't have been clearer or plainer. And they had the inestimable privilege of having lived with and dwelt with that person of God for 3 years. So now they were being left, and Jesus was concerned that they need to make this transition to become now those who would go out and respond and use that teaching and respond to it. He said in the end of chapter 15, you also must testify. And that was their role. But no one asks me where I'm going. All that you're worried about here is that you're grief-stricken because I am leaving you. But you're not asking what the bigger picture is here. None of you ask me, where are you going? But because I've said these things, you are filled with grief. In other words, yes, I'm leaving, I'm going, but you're not asking why I am going or leaving or where I am going to or what the purpose of my leaving is. You're just concerned about yourselves here and about being left bereft and alone and not having access to me. But you should be looking at the larger canvas, because there's something happening here which is being drawn on a huge canvas which will affect not only you, but the entire history of the world is going to be affected here. So none of you asked me where you're going, but because I've said these things, you're filled with grief. But I'm telling you the truth. There's a purpose behind all of this. There is a reason for it that I'm leaving. Not because I'm being capricious, because I've got fed up with ministry, because I want to go and do something else instead. On the contrary, it is for your good that I'm going away. Now, how can that be? Well, a child will always remain a child while he's being spoon-fed and everything is done for them. Often, when you are left alone, that's the time of huge maturity and growing up. Think of a student who reaches the age of 18 and they've been at home for all that period of time of their lives, and their parents have done everything for them, washed their clothes, provided food, the whole lot, given them a room over their heads. And then at the age of 18, they leave to go to university. And suddenly they're in an environment where they know nothing whatsoever or how to do anything. They've got to wash their clothes for themselves. They've got to find out where to get food. They've got to make their own friends. They know nothing about the environment that they're in. It's a massive, sudden leap and change in their lives. It's a milestone of growing up. And people grow up rather rapidly when they are left to their own devices. They have to do so. And it's part of that growing up process here that Jesus is intimating is necessary at this point. For them to move into the next stage, for them to develop and to grow and to stretch into the potential that they have, he has to leave them and stop doing these things for them, so they start to do these things for themselves. Like any child has to leave home, and a child which never leaves home is a child which never really grows up. So what you have here is an important stage in their maturity. Unless I go away, the counselor will not come to you. But if I go, I will send him to you. You can think of that like, if I leave you, then there is a huge amount of growing to be done, a huge amount of calling to memory of things that have said to you. You, at the moment, you just relax and take things easy because I will pick up all the weight, do everything for you. The moment I've gone, you are stretched to capacity, and you'll find that you'll be able to meet that capacity and that wisdom will come back to you. He puts it in this terms of the counselor being sent. I can't send the counselor until I myself have left. And similarly, you can't grow up and do things on your own until I am not here with you, supporting every single step that you take. You have to learn to act under your own initiative and your own control. And indeed, you will take on board all the wisdom that I've given to you, and it will be brought to your mind and memory by the counselor, which is the picture which is being presented here to them. Unless I go away, the counselor will not come to you, but when I go, I will send him to you. And when he comes, there's a threefold task that will take place. He will convict the world of guilt in regard to sin and righteousness and judgment. So convict the world of guilt, will bring in righteousness and also judgment. And Jesus spends some time explaining those three things. First, he says, he will convict the world of sin because men do not believe in me. Now, what is the connection between sin and not believing in Jesus Christ? Well, there's a number of things. One is because Jesus has highlighted by his teaching what the truth is. And despite the fact that the Pharisees and the teachers of the law thought that they fully understood God's law, they were nevertheless far from it. Because they were far from it, they misinterpreted it, and they misunderstood the law of God. They understood it in a legalistic sense, and as a consequence, didn't realize that sin was still endemic in their lives. It's only through Jesus Christ that we have a real understanding of how sin is dealt with and how it needs to be eradicated from the human heart, not by outward observance, not by ritualistic observance, but by a renewal of the heart itself, something which Jesus himself spoke of. So he will convict the world of guilt in regard to sin, because men do not believe in me, because they do not believe, they do not understand, and because they do not believe, they will not be saved either. So there is a remaining in sin through that. In regard to righteousness, because I am going to the Father, where you can see me no longer. Convict the world of righteousness, because I'm going to the Father. What does that mean? Well, it seems to me that Jesus himself will be vindicated. He's been called all manner of names, all kinds of sinfulness, a Sabbath breaker. They are people who are keen to admonish him, to pull him down, to malign him, to accuse him of all manner of things which he didn't do, and to call him a sinner. And yet, here is the one person who is without sin, who does the work of God, and who truly understands the things of God. And despite the accusations flung at him, he will be shown to be righteous, and the Holy Spirit will bring that truth to bear. So that in regard to sin, in regard to righteousness, because I am going to the Father. Going to the Father means to be accepted by God himself. And God accepts those on the basis of the righteousness. You need righteousness in order to relate to God. And you cannot return to God the Father without righteousness. And so by returning, I demonstrate the righteousness that I have, and therefore will be displayed to others. And you'll see that through the crucifixion, and more especially through the resurrection, where I return to God that way. So he will convince the world of guilt, because they have not believed in me, convince the world of righteousness, because I am going to the Father, who only accepts the righteous, and I will be vindicated as righteous. And in regard to judgment, because the prince of this world now stands condemned. Now that's interesting. The prince of this world, Satan, devil, the personification of all that is evil, stands condemned. And how does that occur? Well, it becomes apparent and clear. If you take the most righteous, holy person in the world has ever seen, and if you seek to claim that he is sinful, and you crucify him for what you claim to be his sins, when everyone understands him to be the most righteous person in the world, you do not condemn him. You condemn yourself. For it shows that your values are perverse and your blindness is complete and total. You've taken the Holy One of God, who deserves worship and adoration, and instead you crucify and condemn and kill him. who is condemned by that act? Not the Holy One of God, but those who perform these gross acts of evil. That's where the condemnation comes. And the world, the prince of this world, who is motivating all those acts which will take Christ and crucify him, will stand condemned in history by this one act. And everyone will see that when you take an innocent person and crucify them, it is those who do the crucifying who are condemned and who are judged by that act. And that's the third thing that the Holy Spirit will bring. It'll bring conviction, because the prince of the world now stands condemned. And it becomes irrevocable in that sense. To take that act and that step to crucify the Son of God means condemnation will follow. I have much more to say to you, but more than you can now bear. And I think that we can only conjecture as to what that means, because I think that we're looking here at post-resurrection time, when Jesus provides additional teaching for how they need to go out into the world and preach the gospel to all nations right across the globe, something which they could probably not even envisage themselves doing. Remember, they're still caught in that transition point. They still see themselves as disciples rather than apostles. And in changing of their role, a new teaching has to be given to them to go out into the world. The Great Commission has to be provided here, something they would feel totally unequipped to do. It took them 7 weeks before they get the courage to stand up in Jerusalem and proclaim Jesus Christ as risen. And that's something which will come later. But when the Spirit comes, he, the Spirit of truth, and that, by the way, a masculine term is used here to show that the Spirit is a person, masculine, of truth, he will guide you into all truth. He will not speak on his own, he will only speak what he hears, and he will tell you what is yet to come. And he will bring glory to me by taking from what is mine and making it known to you. He will tell you of what is yet to come. So there is elements of future here. And although Jesus has already intimated it, the fact that they will be not received well by the world, but will be received in the same way that Jesus was received. They crucified him, they will crucify them, and many of them were indeed crucified for their faith. He will bring glory to me by taking from what is mine and making it known to you. All that belongs to the Father is mine. In other words, the glory of God himself is passed to me, which is true, because we speak of Jesus in the same breath as we speak of God. We give to Jesus the same adoration that we give to God. We esteem and glorify Jesus in the same way that we glorify God. And the reason for that is because of what Jesus has made clear to us in this statement and what he expects, that I and the Father are one, and that anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. And my words are not my own words, they are the words of the Father. And similarly, there's nothing therefore to put between the two. One is the corporeal manifestation of the spiritual other. And so all that belongs to the Father is mine, which is why I said the Spirit will take from what is mine and make it known to you. In other words, all three are united in purpose and word and plan and aim and goal. So, in a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me. Emphasizing finally here that this transition point is about to begin. It confuses the disciples because they're still not sure what that means, and we'll see that in the next passage.